And welcome in, Late Kick on the air. It is Tuesday night, November 24th, the year of our Lord 2020. It is Tuesday. Doesn't matter if it's Thanksgiving week. Well, it does in one sense, which I'll touch on in a second. But in this sense, it doesn't matter because we're doing predictions just like we do every Tuesday night. Got 3 games we're going to specifically break down tonight. Now, as for the other hand, yes, it does matter that it's Thanksgiving week. Thank you so much for joining us. Please subscribe to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel right before you travel to wherever you're going to travel and eat whatever you're going to eat. Really thankful you're here with us and have been with us all year. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, what are we doing tonight? Well, as I said, it's Tuesday night. It's prediction night. I didn't need to tell you that. You already knew that. But also, we've got, instead of Thursday, Tuesday night, our Ramen Noodle Express best bets of the week. I've already given out several on Twitter. It is imperative, probably this week even more so than any other week, but it's imperative every week. You're following me on Twitter at LateKickJosh. I put a lot out that you don't see on the show. There's a lot that happens, for instance, this week after the last show of the week airs. This is our last Late Kick Live of this week. It's Tuesday. Well, that means Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. Some games start, but it could be 4 days between now and when toe meets leather. A lot could happen. A lot could change. We could have injuries. We could have COVID suspensions. We could have all kind of different deals. So make sure you're following me there because I can virtually guarantee you we're going to have more plays towards the end of the week than what I'm going to give you towards the end of the show tonight. Also, I want to reiterate, I am in Georgia right now. That's why this looks like it does. The college football playoff rankings have come out, and it's the first batch of rankings of this season, 2020. We're going to react to that separately. So that's not going to be in this show. We're going to react to that separately. I also wanted to let you know another little caveat before we dive into predictions tonight. The South Carolina coaching surge. I think we've had an element of the South Carolina coaching surge in every show that we've done over the past, well, however long it's been since Muschamp has been fired. It feels like a lot longer than it has been, actually. Anyway, there is nothing that I would call groundbreakingly new information to the point where I thought that we needed to include it tonight. However, as I say that, I want to tell you this. Stuff is moving there. I mean, it's obviously moving every day. It could be that we get news or I get a text message or whatever in 5 minutes and we need to record a video. Point being, if that happens, we will put individual recordings out on the YouTube channel. So make sure you're subscribed there. Again, if you haven't already, great time to do it. It's always free. So it's free this time of year too. It's just like it's free in March and April and May. Just subscribe. We've had really good traffic there, really good numbers. It always allows us more freedom to do what we want to do on there. If we have good numbers and we can point to those numbers and say, hey, excuse me, management, hello, look over here. Look, there they are. Here are our people. Here is our audience. They want it. They're there. They're waiting for it. So please subscribe because I know that there may be 1 or 2 or a dozen of you who just come to watch the shows, but you don't subscribe. It doesn't hurt you to do that. And it actually helps you because it helps us. Help yourselves, help us, help you, which should have been the Jerry Maguire line all along. All right, so let's dive into some games here, and we have got 3 that I'm going to break down specifically. I also wanted to remind you, I touched on some other stuff on the Late Kick Extra podcast. We released a new one of those this morning, and that's all Q&A. That was a really good one. There was we took a deep dive on several topics this morning that typically we don't hit on, and it was good. All that plus talked about liquefying turkey in a smoothie. I'm apparently the only person on planet Earth who does that, but that's fine. I'll live my life the way I want to over here. It is America, and they are still allowing you to liquefy turkey and mix it with chocolate whey protein. And as long as they're doing that, this country is worth fighting for. Let's dive into this. Iron Bowl, Saturday, first one I haven't been to in like 7 or 8 years, I realized when I was putting this together. Auburn at Bama. Bama minus 24.5. That's the current line on this. It is a 3:30 kickoff Eastern time, as always, Saturday on CBS. Auburn, I'll put it to you like this. This is the best team Alabama's played since they played Georgia. Seems like a long time ago, right? They had a couple of off weeks. Who else did they play? They played Kentucky. They've played Mississippi State and Tennessee. So, I mean, this is it. This is the best test that they've had, I'll say, since then. Consider how many head coaches Nick Saban has, for lack of a better term, destroyed during his reign, for, again, lack of a better term, in Alabama. All these coaches have come through, some of them not even in the SEC. He's done so much damage in some out-of-conference games. It's put programs out of kilter to the point where they ended up making changes. And yet, through all the smoke, there's Gus Malzahn, just motoring right along in his 8th year at Auburn. it is a testament. I know a lot of you are, well, very few of you are indifferent on him. And in Auburn circles, there are some people who don't like him. I've understood the frustration at times. I've just never understood why people hesitate, some people at least, hesitate to give this guy credit. How many other folks are staying employed for 8 years in the same state as Nick Saban is? I don't know many of them. Even when Saban's not there, not many folks hang around in this conference for 8 years. So there's a lot of crazy stuff that happened last year in this game. I was on the field for that one down in Jordan-Hare Stadium. Crazy stuff. That was Mac Jones getting the start. Tua had been knocked out, and you had the 2 pick sixes. They need it to happen again. Auburn needs it to happen again. Now, they've won 2 of the last 3 in this series. They need it to happen here. So I was looking through some data yesterday, and I came upon a stat that I thought was wrong. I should have known better, but I thought it was wrong. So I hit a little refresh, and I resorted the categories, but it was right. Do you know Alabama has the #1 scoring defense in the SEC right now? It just seems so crazy because it's not that long ago, at least it doesn't feel that way, that we were watching that Ole Miss game going, can they get off the field a single time? Like, are they going to be able to ever get a stop? And yet, here they are, #1 scoring defense in the SEC. Now, there are a few little caveats there that have a lot to do with that. One of them is Stetson Bennett, one is Jarrett Garantano, one is KJ Costello, and one is Terry Wilson. Bless their hearts, but Matt Corral and that Ole Miss offense, they are not. So, yes, Bo Nix is certainly the best quarterback that Pete Golding and Nick Saban and this defense will have faced since really early in the year. But 2 things can be true. It can be true that they haven't been tested like they were early in the year, and it can also be true that they've improved, and I think they have improved. Now, if you're Gus Malzahn and you understand what you have, but also what your limitations are, you certainly have to take a lot of risk here, and I think you got to be comfortable just accepting the risk factor. This is not a game, much as you may want it to be, where you can say, all right, we're taking the air out of the ball here, and we're going to lower our risk factor there, and we're going to control. You're not controlling this game. You may win it. You could win it. You're not controlling it, though. So you just have to make them chase instead of controlling, because that team in Crimson's really good at controlling. Malzahn needs to win first down. I say Malzahn. His team, the players on the field, Auburn, they need to win first down. Now, that's important for a couple of reasons. The first is obvious. Hey, the better you do on first down, the better you could do on the consequent downs. Consequent down. I don't know if you guys ever do that, but there are some times where you know exactly where your sentence is going, and you know exactly what you want to say, and then this word randomly comes out of your mouth. Like I wanted to say subsequent there, obviously, and I said consequent. And I don't know where it comes from. I don't know how that works. I'm not a neurosurgeon, but I just wish I could lessen that because I do a lot of live radio. I do a lot of live webcasts, and it doesn't exactly bode well for random words to be coming out. Okay, that's an FCC violation waiting to happen because they're not all as innocent as consequent. But anyway, you want to do good on first down. Auburn has to do good on first down here. They got to win them, and that is to stay on schedule, obviously. But here's what Alabama's been quietly improving. They've quietly improved their third down defense. It was a nightmare for them. In fact, it's been a problem several years running for them. Well, they've improved week over week this particular year, but the detractor could say, okay, we'll go back and list those names again. Stetson Bennett, Jarrett Garantano, KJ Costello, Terry Wilson. You haven't faced a quarterback who makes you really concerned on any down, much less third down. Well, now maybe you have one. Bo Nix played out of his mind in this game last year. It was an up and down year last year. It's been an up and down year this year for him. But if you're going to pop one, this is where you want to pop it. And if you can get to third down, and you're not looking at 3rd and 8 constantly, I mean, if you're looking at 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, everything's on the table, that's how you start to tilt the game a little bit early on. Moving papers around here if you hear that sound. Sorry about that. But that's how you tilt the game early on, and that's how they hang around. And that's really the entire goal with Auburn or anybody, anytime they play one of these big favorites. You can look at a game, and it's 4 quarters. But if you can start shaving a quarter or 2 off and you get to halftime and it's competitive, well, all right, then it's not a football game anymore. Then it's a half. That's 30 minutes. And then if you can get it mid to late third quarter, and these coaches will tell you, I've heard Malzahn talk about it before, if you can get a game out early into the 4th quarter, all that stuff's irrelevant. Who the big favorite was, who's got more talent, that stuff you don't worry about as much because really what it's going to come down to instead of 30 or 40 plays is you got a handful of plays you got to win. And at that point, you'll just take your chances. Now, if you go back and watch Auburn this year, I've watched every game they've played. I may have watched every snap of every game they've played. early in the year, they played Kentucky week 1, they played Georgia week 2, they just played Tennessee. And the point is, that spans their entire season. But there's something that the more physical teams have been able to do on them, normally to the degree that you wouldn't see done against Auburn. And that's just kind of run the ball right at them. Now, their run defense has gotten better because they've gotten a little bit healthier as the season's gone on, but they can still be had a little bit in the ground game. Eric Gray averaged right at 8 yards per carry against them last week. The stat I saw, and I kind of threw it around, I saw it bouncing around the college football ether this week. Eric Gray averaged more yards per carry than Georgia had total yards, or as many. It was right there at 8, which was a crazy number. He had a good day against Auburn. It didn't matter because a pick 6 in the end zone will negate all that, and Tennessee happily obliged. But they ran the ball well against Auburn. Now, here is what you have to think about. Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, those teams, what do they have in common? Lackluster quarterback play. And yet they still ran the ball on you if you're Auburn. So now you got a better offensive line in Alabama. You got a better tailback than any of them you faced so far this year. And you have to throw into the equation an elite passing game. I think Alabama's going to have quite a fair amount of success running here, and it's going to be a situation where you got to be opportunistic. You got to defend the red zone because they're going to get down there several times. You got to defend the red zone. If you can count on 2 pick sixes showing up again, that'd be wonderful. But I don't necessarily know that you can count on that. That was last year, and that stuff happens at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Doesn't really happen as much for Auburn on the road. So how many points do you think Auburn needs? If I were to tell you, well, here we are. It's before game time. So if I tell you before the game, name the number that Auburn has to score to win, I think it's 40 minimum. I think it's in the 40s. If you're able to push Bama to the wire and they're actually keeping their foot on the gas offensively for 4 quarters, I think they're scoring over 40 points. I think they're approaching that. So you got to get into the 40s to have a shot here. And again, what could potentially derail that is if you end up forcing a lot of turnovers. And Alabama has not been any kind of turnover machine this year. So you would have to have some things happen really to the degree that we haven't seen happen all year. So in light of that, and let's just assume that's not going to happen, I think 40 is the number. So Colin, let's go ahead and show the game capsule here. The Vegas number, as I told you, is 24.5. That's what we thought it would be. I thought it would be 23.5, and so it's moved up and over 24 to 24.5. And we agree. We got it a little bit fatter than that even. We've got Alabama minus 25. So here's the way I see this going. I see, you Bama fans, you'll love this. I'm looking at a missed call right now. I'm ignoring Tim Watt's phone call because I am talking about his team right now. So we're hitting ignore, and I'm going to clip that for individual use, and I'm going to send it to Tim later. All right, that was fun. I'm glad you all got to witness that with me. So Auburn, I think, is going to be very competitive in this game. Kentucky, when they played Alabama, you probably saw the final score, and it was 63-3. Kentucky was very competitive with Bama early on. They were heavily tilting time of possession. I mean, they were really they were doing some good things. It didn't matter. I don't think Auburn's losing by 60 Saturday, but what I think will happen is it's going to be very competitive early on. If you're watching midway through the second quarter, you may be texting your buddy saying, hey, this may be worth a look. Auburn's really giving Bama a fight. But then what's going to happen is, well, halftime's going to occur, but in general, what's going to happen is you're going to realize, man, these 60-minute football games are long, aren't they? Whew, this thing's forever. Do you remember back, it didn't seem like all that long ago Auburn was competitive here, and now all of a sudden, man, Bama's broken it open. I think that's what's going to happen. I'm going to take Alabama to win. I think they'll also end up covering the 25 in a manner in which you say, man, I know they covered, but this game just felt so much more competitive than that, didn't it? Give me Bama to win. We're going to lay the 24 too. I think I may have said 25. That's because that's the number in front of me right now that I wrote down. So that's a bad on me. All right, let's move on. Iowa State at Texas. This is a Friday noon Eastern time kickoff on ABC. Heavy bias here, and I'm just going to tell you it is implied. Heavy bias from yours truly. Iowa State, we at Iowa State, as the Horns are a 1-point favorite, by the way, we are trying to win our first outright conference title since 1912. Friends, that's the year the Titanic sank. It's been a little while since the outright conference title found it hanging itself in a rafter in Ames, Iowa. They got to win out. I mean, that's kind of what's in front of them right now. They got Texas this week, and then West Virginia, Big 12 championship game. So it could happen. JP, Angels in the outfield. Always love that kid's initials. It could happen. I'm waving my arms as we speak. there's some strange mojo around Texas right now. Because on one hand, they've won 3 straight games, and then they had last week off involuntarily. And so a lot of the bad juju that was around the program, at least on the surface, after the Oklahoma loss, rather, it's kind of subsided for a time being. They've won 3 in a row, as I said, but here's the bad part. This is why I said it was strange. The bad part is, have you noticed what's happening in recruiting? They're just bleeding. Quinn Ewers left, and that was bad enough. Well, now you got more 5-stars leaving the state of Texas, and my Texas buddies don't even want to talk about football right now. When they text me, they just say, man, is Herman ever going to be able to keep kids in state? And to them, I answer, I have no clue. In fact, I don't necessarily have a ton of confidence that it's going to happen. And we talked about that earlier in the year. There's not a whole lot of hot seat talk with Tom Herman right now because they're winning at the moment. But trust me, if they lose Saturday, that stuff will be turned right back up. So I'm never, wildly swinging on that. I've stated my opinion several times on Tom Herman. So let's talk about this game. And let's ask. I'll ask you because I was asking myself this. What do you value? Because we got 2 factors in play here. So on one hand, Texas, of course, didn't play last week, so they have the extra week of preparation. And then I look at Iowa State. Now, Iowa State defensively had some troubles early in the year. Last 3 games, they have rectified a lot of that, at least in terms of percentages and data. They're giving up 17.7 points per game defensively over the past 3 games. So that's not nearly as poor as things had been at times earlier in the year. And to be honest, that's a theme with a lot of teams. Even teams we're talking about in the national title picture right now. Ohio State, Bama, Oregon is dealing with this at the moment. I mean, a lot of teams this year, for whatever reason, it was kind of a common theme, even amongst the good ones. They struggled defensively earlier in the year. But the good to great ones, they have improved. The mediocre ones are just terrible from wire to wire. Texas has to fuse their season. That's the term that I chose to describe what Texas needs to happen here. They have to have a fusion of the season because it's been disjointed. There have been portions of 2020 where Texas has done A right, and then A has gone by the wayside, and then they've done B right. So remember those losses early in the year when all the hot seat talk, it was cranked up full throttle. Do you remember what Texas was doing to lose games, whether it be TCU or Oklahoma? They had mental error after mental error, penalties all over the place, but it was just self-inflicted, a lot of it. Special teams miscues, it was disastrous, and they were playing bad defense. Now, offensively, I mean, they could score. They weren't terrible there, but that's what was happening. Well, they've cleaned up a lot of the problem areas there. They've cleaned up a lot of that, but here's what's happened. As they've cleaned it up, offense has kind of gone into a little bit of a shell. And so you got to be sitting there wondering to yourself, how hard is it just to put complete games together? I mean, I'm watching some of these elite teams. I watch Alabama. They look like a transformer every week. They're just a machine. They just operate the same every week. Why can't we do that? Well, this is the week you need to have it happen. Because Texas has still got a lot to play for here, too. And they just need to fuse. I mean, if they could fuse that, they could win by double digits Saturday if they were to fuse all that together. Now, do we expect it? Well, I found there's not a lot of skill in predicting when the fusion is going to happen with Texas football. Iowa State's going to need Brock Purdy to have a really, really good game Saturday, possibly need him to have the best game he plays all season. Said that about Ian Book against Clemson. Now, this is not nearly as tall a task for the Cyclones as it was for the Irish against Clemson, even though they won. But that's kind of what you need to happen, and I'm going to tell you why. Texas, if you've watched them from afar, or you've just seen final scores, maybe highlights, but you haven't really watched them, there are some strengths on this team, and one of them is they got a darn good run defense. I mean, Chuba Hubbard for Oklahoma State, Letty Brown for West Virginia, I think both of those guys were held under 3.1 or 3.2 yards per carry. I mean, they did not have a high yards per carry average against Texas. So there's been no point this year where you turn TV on and a running back's just running up and down the field on Texas. That's not the way it's been. So Breece Hall, I know at Iowa State, he's in the Heisman conversation. I'm happy to contribute to that. But I'm going to tell you right now, it'd really surprise me if we turned it on and, he's just churning up 150, 175 yards on the ground Saturday. It needs to be Brock Purdy's game. He's going to have to do it, and he's going to have to avoid the turnovers in order to do it. He's got to avoid a lot of the mistakes that Texas has made at various points this year. So, Colin, let's throw up the game capsule for this one. It is Iowa State, Texas. So many ramifications here. I'm glad this is on a Friday. I don't know if they're glad, but I'm glad it's on a Friday because oh man, the 2-day splits after Thanksgiving, always love that. The capsule looks like this. We have got the Vegas number, as I said, with Texas -1. Now, here's what I expected. You would think, I mean, if I'm running this model and I lean Iowa State as much as I do, I thought there was going to be a lot of cyclone bias here. But, you know, I'm halfway proud of myself that my own model spit out a result that I don't want to happen necessarily. It's nothing against Texas. In fact, I pull for Texas. I long for Texas to be great. But in this particular matchup, you know how we roll on late cake. Well, we have Texas -2. So our model leans Longhorn. And since I don't have a particularly strong feel on this game, personally, in terms of, you know, where I would place a wager, I'm not betting on this game, in other words, my default setting is to roll with the model. And so I actually am going to take Texas to win the game. It pains me a little bit. It's one of those situations where I kind of hope I'm wrong, but I'm going to take Texas to win the game. Now, here's the flip side. The flip side is that's the prediction, but if it is wrong and if it loses, I can almost assure you on our Sunday show, among the other games we're talking about, we'll touch on this game, and you know I'll wave my yellow and red pom-pom a little bit, may even wear an Iowa State t-shirt, of which I have 5 now, so thank you, the collection continues to grow. But I guarantee you, in some shape, form, or fashion, we will be talking about Tom Herman, hot seat talks back, what's going to happen in Austin, all that stuff will be turned right back up to 11. Because it only takes 4 quarters. You guys know that as well as anyone. So give me Texas to win. Give me Texas to cover. Very little confidence in that. We'll just see how things go. And don't think for a second that because that thing's happening early on a Friday, everyone will have forgotten about it. Like last week that happened. When I paused, Colin, that's where we can cut that video off. So last week it happened. On Friday night, Purdue got completely and totally railroaded in the Big Ten. I mean, railroaded. And so there was a phantom pass interference call that negated a go-ahead touchdown with under a minute to go. And when I say phantom, I mean pure phantom call. Horrible. And I just now remembered it. We didn't touch on it Sunday night. And the reason is because it happened on a weeknight instead of on a Saturday. And we don't talk a ton of Purdue here, but you could change that if you ask for it. All right, let's move on. Notre Dame favored by 4.5. At North Carolina. This is a 3:30 Eastern Time kickoff on ABC. Yet another Friday special here. This is so beautiful. Friday's going to be a good day, guys. I really stress to you, I can't stress to you strong enough terms, you need to clear that schedule off because you got a big one at noon with the Iowa State and Texas. You got a big one at 3:30 in Notre Dame, North Carolina. You got Oregon playing in prime time. So this is great. And selfishly for us, we got that big Central Michigan bet at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. So let's dive into this game. As I said, Notre Dame favored by 4.5. Oh boy, I think the spread surprised a lot of people. It surprises them right now. This thing opened around a touchdown and it's come down to 4.5. Notre Dame is sitting in a great position in terms of their season right now. They have not lost a game. They're already past the Clemson hurdle, and they are looking like a very strong playoff contender at the moment. But here's what they need. I noticed some people asking this week, do they need to win this game? Or, you know, can they afford to lose this one and do this and do that? You got to get rid of that stuff, man. You got to have a killer mentality. Like Notre Dame, maybe even independent of the fans and whatnot, like the Notre Dame program, and I'm not saying I've heard any players talking like that, they got to have a killer mentality. If they do, the fan base kind of adopts it anyway. Win every game. Just go undefeated. That's your goal. Win every game. And I'll tell you another thing. If that's not enough to motivate you, think about this. Well, if you lose a game and you're still making the playoff, you may be playing Alabama in the first round versus playing a more winnable team in a more winnable matchup. So if you want to play for seeding, if that's where your motivation is, well, then think that way. But worry about winning every game. That would be my advice. Now, 60 minutes. If you're watching the entire show, 60 minutes, I was talking about within the context of the Iron Bowl earlier today. It's such a long time. Football games last a long time. You can do a lot in the 3.5 hours of real time that it takes to play most of these things. Boston College found this out. Boston College got up early on Notre Dame. I had a buddy who had picked that upset. You know, it was the week after the Clemson game, so everyone was calling that their upset alert. And Notre Dame was favored by 13.5. BC gets up early, and there come the text messages. People texting me saying, hey, this is actually going to happen. Not only did Notre Dame end up with 31 by halftime and ended up pulling away, that game was so long that people went from thinking Boston College is going to pull the upset to Notre Dame's up comfortably at the half. They stretch it in the third quarter, fourth quarter. Boston College is having to fight to score garbage time touchdowns to even get back within reach. That's how long that game is. It's like a whole season in one game. And I say that because that's exactly where this game could be headed. I heard Mack Brown, North Carolina head coach, I heard him talking earlier this week, and he said something along the lines of, we know where Notre Dame is. Like, we know they're a playoff contender. I'm looking forward to this game because we get to figure out where we are. Well, that's a good question. Where is North Carolina? They've been a hard team, even for the fan base. You Tar Heel fans know exactly what I'm talking about. Your team's been a hard team to nail down this year. There have been times, speaking of Boston College, when North Carolina played Boston College, I thought that was a game that they were going to unload, and they didn't. It did just flat, whatever reason. You can name a million of them. They just didn't. And so you got to be careful here for obvious reasons. North Carolina is not holding Notre Dame under 30. I don't think they have any illusions of doing that. You guys in Tar Heel country, you've watched your defense, and so you know what the limitations are there. That's not the motivation, or that's not, rather, the confidence. That's not where it's inspired from anyone who's leaning North Carolina to win this game. They're leaning North Carolina because they think they can name the score. They think they can run the score up. So you're not holding Notre Dame under 30. Well, how high above 30 can you score? I mean, can you avoid having a game that's played in the 20s or 30s? I think that's your only way. Because I can tell you they're probably going to get theirs. And so how do you steal some possessions? How do you make sure you're consistently scoring? And that leads me to this next question. How do you score in general? Because I don't know how many of you have watched a lot of North Carolina. You probably, again, you may just be a highlight watcher. You're not a North Carolina fan, and so you know, oh, they got a really good offense down there in Chapel Hill. I see that Howell kid. What's his name? Sam Howell. I see him all the time throwing the ball all over the place. Well, that's in highlight culture, and he does throw the ball a lot. They do throw the ball a lot. They got a really good run game, and they have the ability to pop you in explosive runs too. They are right at or near the top of the conference and the country in explosive runs. Do you remember the Clemson Notre Dame game? Because that's where they held Travis Etienne to, I think, 28 total yards, actually, rushing. And it was well under 3 yards per carry. I think it was like, they're under 3 yards per carry. In fact, they're at 2.87 yards per carry on the season. That's getting it done defensively. So something's got to give there. Either their opposer, which I can promise you they're not in terms of the run defense, and you're going to run all over him, or you're going to have Sam Howell shoulder maybe an inordinate amount of the load relative to what he's used to, and he's going to have to do it against probably the best defense that he will play all year and certainly will have played all year. This is where I worry really about North Carolina, because I don't worry about them being able to be competitive. I don't think they're going to get out-athleted badly. It's not going to be that. It's going to be when you get one of your fastballs taken away, when you get one of your best pitches taken away. And I've seen times this year against inferior competition where you just appear to not have a good changeup, and you don't have a really good slider. It's once they take it away, maybe we can get by. Maybe we can sneak by a team like Boston College, but I mean, we do not have it in our bag of tools right now. Well, if Notre Dame, which is one of the best teams in America, if they're taking away that fastball, and then they're saying, all right, well, you're going to have to beat us with one leg here, I don't know that you can do it. And I'll look on the other side too, though, with Notre Dame. Like, I don't think this is a game. There's no excuse, I'll put it this way, for this game to fall totally on the shoulders of Ian Book. A lot of his overall legend, when the book is written on him, no pun intended, it'll stem from that Clemson game, because I think he played the best game I've ever seen him play in the biggest moment. I'm not saying he carried the whole load, but he played like he was ready to. There's no reason he should have to play that way here. They should be able to run the ball effectively. I mean, they should gash North Carolina. They should have really good success running the ball. But you don't run the ball when you're trying to keep up and you're down 2 or 3 touchdowns. And that's kind of the situation you hope for if you're North Carolina. Maybe not a 3-touchdown lead. You'd love it. It's not realistic. But you wonder to yourself, how do we make them that uncomfortable? How do we stagger them in the early portions of this game to where Ian Book's having to be the one to beat us? Now, he's capable of it, but you would much rather have that as the scenario than just them leaning on you all afternoon, all evening, and night, because you know how that ends eventually. So you get maybe a couple 3-and-outs early, maybe force turnover, special teams pops them, but whatever you got to do, you need to control it early so that it becomes a game that Notre Dame doesn't necessarily want it to be. Let's take a look at the capsule here, rather, Colin. I don't know what in the world a capsule is, but a capsule is this. It is the Vegas number and our number combined right next to each other, so you can see Notre Dame's favored by 4.5 by Vegas, and we agree. I mean, we've got Notre Dame -4, so really tight lines this week with all the games that we're predicting. I am kind of on the other side, though. In fact, I'm not only going to take Notre Dame to win, I'm kind of confident in the cover. It's not going to be an official bet. I'm not putting any money on this, but I'm overriding by 0.5 point. It's not a big leap. I'm overriding our own system here a little bit. So I'm going to take Notre Dame to win, and I will take Notre Dame to cover there. It's a game they need to establish a killer mentality in and display it if they already have it. All right, flip the paper over. And let's wrap it up with the Ramen Noodle Express, over 58% on the season. Chugging right along. We've already released a few of these. Make sure you are following me on Twitter at LateKickJosh. A perfect example could be found in these first two bets. So Colin, let's show them to him here. North Texas was +5.5 when I handed the game out. If you didn't already get it when I handed the game out, they are now +3.5. You would have had that on Twitter at LateKickJosh. North Texas is playing at UTSA, by the way. How about a Friday game? Central Michigan. When I handed this game out, they were -5.5 at Eastern Michigan. That one's gone up to 7 or 7.5, which we told you it would in no uncertain terms the other night. You got to get them early. Now for some games that I have released and some that I haven't released. Virginia -9. I released this one yesterday on Twitter. It's still the same, though, as of recording time. It's still the same. They are playing at FSU, so we're taking Virginia -9. Now, here are the two new ones. Kansas State shut out last week. I think it was 45-0 at the hands of Iowa State, so we're going to bet them this week. Kansas State +5.5 at Baylor, and then we're going to lay the points with a team that everyone's avoiding this week because they think they're in letdown or emotionally drained, and that's fine. We think this number should be 16, and it's actually 10.5. Oklahoma State -10.5 at home against Texas Tech. So the 5 best bets so far. North Texas +5.5. Central Michigan -5.5. That's a Friday game. Virginia -9. Kansas State +5.5. And Oklahoma State -10.5. Listen, from all of us to you, happy Thanksgiving. Make sure you're following me on Twitter. A lot could happen between now and Sunday, so at LateKickJosh where you want to be there. Also, I have some slots available still. For those of you interested in the field of sports media, I've actually got a session I'm going to start as soon as I hit stop record on this. I think Jeffrey, that's who I have lined up. So if you think you have the tools, the talent, the desire, passion, ideas, and what you're missing is the game plan. How in the world do you get in that secretive industry? Where's the in? Well, we'll talk about it at LateKickJosh on Twitter, joshpate706@gmail.com. All right, for Director Colin, for producer Jordan on the podcast side of things, I'm Josh Pate. Have a great Thanksgiving. Enjoy the games. I'll see you Sunday night. God bless.